Ancient merchants moved forbidden treasures right past Imperial guards. This video reveals 15 smuggling operations the ancients perfected and how authorities fought back. You will discover how clever deception shaped early economies and law enforcement. How did Roman ships hide spices in plain sight? What secret paths did Chinese tea caravans use to avoid detection? These stories show a hidden war of wits that changed history. What do you think drives people to become so brilliantly sneaky? Royal monopolies turned everyday goods into fortunes waiting to be made. Imagine a world where a single sack of cinnamon or a small block of silk could set you up for life, if only you could get it past the tax collectors and imperial guards. This was the reality for ancient merchants. Rulers from Rome to Persia declared exclusive control over the most desired items, from Chinese silk to Arabian spices, imposing such heavy taxes that the legitimate price became absurd. For a merchant facing these restrictions, the choice was stark. They could follow the law and barely scrape by, or they could become clever and a little bit crooked. The immense, difficult-to-patrol borders of these empires made the second option incredibly tempting. Vast deserts, rugged mountain passes, and endless coastlines were impossible for any ancient government to watch completely. This was not a world of instant communication or satellite surveillance. A caravan could vanish into a canyon for weeks, and a ship could slip into a hidden cove, its journey known only to those who profited from the silence. Even respected merchant guilds, the backbone of long-distance trade, often operated in a shadowy middle ground. An official trade permit might cover a shipment of grain, but what about those extra amphorae of wine hidden beneath the deck, or the bundles of pepper tucked inside bales of common wool? The line between a savvy businessman and a smuggler was frequently blurred. This fundamental friction between the greed of empires and the ingenuity of individuals created a hidden economy that moved in the shadows of the official one, proving that where there is a rule, someone will inevitably find a way around it. The shimmering heat of the Taklamakan Desert hid more than just sand. A caravan's official cargo of jade often concealed its true treasure, bundles of silk so fine they were worth more than their weight in gold. Chinese emperors held a royal monopoly on silk production, treating the knowledge of sericulture as a state secret. To export this fabric without imperial permission was a crime punishable by death, a risk that only multiplied its value for those willing to defy the throne. This created a perfect storm of motive and opportunity, birthing sophisticated smuggling networks along the Silk Road's most remote trails. How did these merchants outwit an entire empire? Their methods were brilliantly deceptive. They ran decoy caravans loaded with legal goods to draw the attention of border guards, while the real contraband moved separately along treacherous mountain paths known only to a handful of trusted guides. They crafted custom camel saddles with hidden compartments and timed their journeys to coincide with sandstorms or the changing of military patrols. Historical records even speak of complex signaling systems, using mirrors or specific bird calls to warn other caravans of approaching authorities. And when all else failed, a well-placed bribe could make a vigilant guard suddenly look the other way. The driving force behind this entire shadow economy was simple, relentless demand. The Roman elite developed an insatiable appetite for Chinese silk, a desire so strong it created a massive drain on the Roman treasury. This desperation for luxury on one end of the world and the iron-fisted control on the other forged a hidden war of wits across continents, proving that no law is strong enough to stop an idea whose time has come, especially when that idea is wrapped in silk. A Roman merchant ship rocking gently at the dock in Ostia seemed to be carrying nothing but ordinary olive oil. tax officials would carefully check the long rows of amphorae, the common clay jars used for everything from wine to grain. They would tap the sides, listen for the right sound, and check the wax seals. Everything appeared perfectly legal. What these inspectors could not see were the cleverly engineered false bottoms inside many of those jars, creating secret compartments that held a fortune in eastern spices, rare incense, or even tiny gemstones. This was the Amphora Switcheroo, a masterpiece of ancient smuggling. The individuals behind this deception were not just traders, they were skilled craftsmen. They learned to carefully cut an amphora in half, insert a hidden inner layer, and then reseal the jar with such precision that the seam was invisible under the original glaze. They used special clays and firing techniques to ensure the false bottom would not sound hollow when tapped by a suspicious official's probe. The deception often went far beyond the jars themselves. A merchant might present a completely falsified cargo manifest, listing 100 amphorae of cheap fish sauce. Under the cover of night, with the help of a bribed dockworker, 20 of those jars might be swapped for nearly identical ones that held priceless black pepper in their secret bases. How do you stop a crime that hides in plain sight? The Roman tax collectors, known as publicani, eventually grew wise. They developed long, thin metal probes that could be inserted through the main opening of an amphora to feel for a false interior wall. They began to keep detailed records of pottery workshops and their specific styles, looking for jars that did not quite match their supposed origin. This escalating battle of wits, played out on crowded docks, turned an everyday container into a weapon of deception and proved that the most effective secrets are often the ones we look at every single day without ever truly seeing. The sacred halls of an Egyptian temple were not just places of worship, they were fortresses of wealth, and that made them irresistible targets from within. In the shadows of Thebes, priests who held the keys to the inner sanctums discovered a dangerous truth. Their religious authority and unrestricted access to the temple treasuries provided the perfect cover for moving fortunes right under the noses of the pharaoh's officials. These were not common thieves, but highly organized networks of temple scribes, accountants, and even high priests who systematically documented their own thefts. They manipulated sacred inventories, listing a golden statue as being sent for ritual cleansing when it was actually being smuggled out through a labyrinth of hidden tunnels known only to the inner circle. The sheer scale of temple wealth made the deception possible. A single ceremonial necklace or a cache of lapis lazuli could be replaced with a clever forgery or simply recorded as lost, its disappearance hidden among the thousands of other items in the vast treasury. These priestly smugglers did not work alone. They partnered with trusted merchants who could blend stolen artifacts into legitimate cargoes, perhaps hiding a golden amulet within a shipment of temple linen destined for a royal palace. The system was so effective because it exploited the very sanctity of the temple. Who would dare to accuse a high priest of such a crime? The authorities, however, eventually grew wise. Pharaohs began appointing independent overseers, officials who reported directly to the crown and not the temple hierarchy, to conduct surprise audits. They implemented a system of dual seals, requiring both a temple priest and a royal scribe to be present for any entry into the treasury. This clash between divine trust and human greed created a silent war within the holiest of places, proving that even the most sacred walls could not always contain the temptation of a fortune in gold. Even the swiftest royal messenger could carry a secret. The Persian royal road was an engineering marvel, a vast network of well-maintained highways stretching over 1,600 miles, built to speed the king's commands across his sprawling empire. Couriers on horseback operating in a swift relay system could traverse the entire distance in just 9 days. Their official duty was to carry military dispatches and administrative decrees, a flow of information meant to tighten the empire's grip. Yet this very system of control became a smuggler's dream. Clever merchants realized that a message tube sealed with a royal emblem was the perfect hiding place. They began bribing these imperial riders, or even placing their own men into the postal service. A seemingly official scroll might contain a hidden second layer of parchment, its surface filled not with royal decrees, but with coded instructions on where to move untaxed goods. One such message might look like a mundane supply request for a garrison, but to a trained eye, the listed quantities of grain and wine actually indicated the number of silk bales and the price to be paid at a secret warehouse. The system was brilliantly efficient, turning the emperor's own communication network into a shadowy telegraph for the black market. How do you police the people you trust to deliver your laws? The Persian authorities, under rulers like Darius the Great, were not fools. They eventually formed a special corps of inspectors, men with the authority to stop any messenger, even one claiming to be on urgent royal business. These agents would randomly search riders, their saddlebags, and their message cases, looking for the subtle signs of tampering or the use of unofficial codes. This created a high-stakes game of cat and mouse on the open road, where a broken wax seal could mean a death sentence, proving that the most powerful tools of an empire can often be turned against it. The same greed that corrupted temples and imperial messengers also infected the very source of Athenian power. Deep within the silver mines of Lorien, the lifeblood of the city-state was being secretly diverted. This was not a simple theft, it was a sophisticated operation running parallel to the official one, orchestrated by the very people who knew the mine's every secret passage and blind spot. The state relied on this silver to mint its famous coins, the Athenian owl, which funded its navy and democratic government. Every ounce that went missing was a direct threat to Athenian supremacy. The mine operators and workers, facing grueling conditions, saw a different kind of opportunity in the glittering rock. Their methods were as ingenious as they were desperate. They stitched hidden pockets into their grimy work tunics, designed to hold chunks of raw ore. They would conceal processed metal shavings inside loaves of bread meant for their own meals, or bury small silver nuggets in carts carrying waste rock out of the main pits. Some historical accounts even suggest the most daring workers would swallow tiny, carefully wrapped packets of processed silver, planning to retrieve their illicit treasure after they had passed through the final inspection point. The authorities were not idle. They established multiple checkpoints where every worker was thoroughly searched upon leaving the mine complex. They offered substantial rewards to informants, turning the mining communities into hotbeds of suspicion where a single whisper could lead to arrest. This internal war over a precious metal reveals a fundamental truth that the most secure system can be undone from within by those who know its workings best. The scent of wealth in the ancient world had a very particular smell, and it reeked of rotting shellfish. In the Phoenician city of Tyre, the production of Tyrian purple dye was a state secret guarded as fiercely as any treasure. Derived from the murex snail, the process was grotesquely slow, requiring thousands of mollusks to produce a single ounce of the vibrant, color-fast dye that became the ultimate symbol of royalty from Rome to Persia. With royal decrees monopolizing its trade, a single vial of this liquid purple could command a fortune on the black market. For the merchants of Tyre, this created an irresistible opportunity. Their official shipments of dyed wool, carefully documented and taxed, were often just a decoy. The real contraband moved in far more creative ways. They discovered that undyed, greasy wool was a perfect sponge, capable of absorbing significant quantities of the precious liquid. A bale of common wool, outwardly plain, could be soaked in concentrated dye. Once it reached its secret destination, the dye could be washed out, leaving the wool a worthless, stained rag but recovering the immensely valuable pigment. Another method involved sealing small amounts of the dye inside hollow pottery tiles or the double walls of amphorae supposedly filled with olive oil. The most ambitious smugglers bypassed the dye altogether, instead smuggling the live murex snails themselves in barrels of seawater, aiming to establish clandestine dye works on remote, unpatrolled coastlines far from the king's inspectors. This is where the smugglers faced their greatest challenge. The dye-making process itself produced an overwhelmingly foul odor, a stench of decay that could carry for miles on the sea breeze. It was a billboard announcing illegal activity. Authorities quickly learned to use this against the criminals. They employed teams of scent hounds, dogs specially trained to recognize the unique, pungent aroma of murex processing. These canine patrols would be rowed along coastlines, their noses twitching at the air, ready to alert their handlers to the smell of an illicit fortune brewing in a hidden cove. This clash of wits turned a simple sensory clue into a tool of enforcement, proving that even the most brilliant deception can be undone by something as elemental as a smell. The lifeblood of Rome arrived by sea, in the deep holds of grain ships crossing from Egypt and North Africa. This was not mere trade, it was a matter of imperial survival. The state-controlled Annona system guaranteed a daily bread ration for hundreds of thousands of citizens, a safeguard against famine and the riots that would inevitably follow. To tamper with this supply line was to risk destabilizing the entire empire, which is precisely why the rewards for doing so were astronomically high. Unscrupulous ship captains, often in league with corrupt port officials, perfected the art of the diversion. A ship might officially be carrying 1,000 tons of Egyptian wheat destined for the state granaries. But what if 50 tons of that grain never arrived? The methods were brilliantly deceitful. Some captains employed false bottomed hulls, constructing a hidden compartment that could be filled with high-quality grain siphoned from the main cargo hold. When inspectors came aboard, they would see a full shipment, never guessing that the best part of it was sealed beneath their feet. More audacious schemes involved phantom pirates. A captain would report being attacked by brigands who made off with a portion of his cargo. He would have the torn sails and staged battle damage to prove it. In reality, that so-called stolen grain was already being quietly sold to private bakeries on the black market, its disappearance neatly explained by a fictional crime. The entire operation relied on falsified manifests and the complicity of dockworkers who could alter records with a quick stroke of a stylus. How could Rome possibly defend against such an insidious threat from within its own supply chain? The answer was the creation of a powerful new official, the Praefectus Annani. Appointed directly by the emperor, the prefect of the grain supply wielded immense authority. His inspectors began meeting incoming grain ships not at the dock, but out at sea before any crew could communicate with accomplices on shore. They would board the vessels, take independent measurements of the cargo, and compare it to the manifests from the point of origin. This simple act of verification, of intercepting the truth before it could be corrupted on land, turned the tide in this hidden war. It was a stark reminder that the most dangerous smugglers are not always the ones who operate in the dark, but those who learn to manipulate the system in broad daylight, diverting the very sustenance of a civilization for their own private gain. The scent of cinnamon and pepper was a perfume of power in the ancient world, and the port of Musaris was its epicenter. Royal officials stood watch as merchants loaded their ships, every sack of spice carefully weighed and taxed for the king's treasury. But the staggering profits from this trade made deception inevitable. The methods these smugglers devised were a masterclass in maritime misdirection. One of the most effective tricks was to pack precious peppercorns inside bales of less valuable, bulkier cargo like coir rope or raw cotton. To a casual inspector, the ship was carrying common goods, the sharp, aromatic scent of the spices masked by the earthy smell of the fiber. For larger operations, a fleet of small, inconspicuous fishing boats became the key. These vessels, which authorities rarely bothered to search, would sail out past the horizon to rendezvous with larger foreign ships waiting in international waters. Under the cover of night or a sudden squall, the contraband would be transferred, turning a local fishing trip into a critical link in a global smuggling chain. Back on land, a network of hidden warehouses, tucked away in secluded coves or disguised as ordinary village homes along the Malabar coast, served as way stations, allowing smugglers to stockpile goods away from the prying eyes of port authorities. How do you patrol 1,000 miles of coastline? The Indian kingdoms, particularly the Cholas, fought back with organized intelligence. They established a system of fast coastal patrol boats and, more importantly, a web of paid informants. A fisherman enjoying a sudden windfall or a dockworker spending too freely could attract the attention of these royal agents. This was not just a local issue, it was an early form of international crime fighting. The demand for spices in Rome and the Middle East had created a shadow economy that stretched across oceans, proving that a taste for luxury could build invisible bridges between empires, defying royal monopolies and redrawing the maps of commerce in secret. High in the misty peaks of the Himalayas, a caravan's journey was measured in more than just miles. The Tea Horse Road was a vertigo-inducing network of trails connecting China to Tibet, a vital artery where Chinese tea was traded for Tibetan war horses. This official exchange, however, masked a far more dangerous and profitable shadow trade moving in the opposite direction. While the official ledgers recorded countless bricks of tea, smugglers saw these very bricks as the perfect hiding place. They became masters of a unique form of deception, hollowing out the dense, compressed blocks of tea leaves to create secret cavities. Inside these hidden pockets, they could stash thin sheets of salt, a state-controlled commodity, or even slivers of iron and copper, metals desperately needed for weapons and tools but strictly forbidden for private trade. The caravan masters themselves were often in on the scheme, coordinating with local mountain tribes who guided them along narrow, crumbling paths that bypassed the imperial outposts entirely. These routes were known only through generations of oral tradition, trails where a single misstep could mean a 1,000-foot plunge, a risk taken for the promise of a fortune. The Chinese authorities were fully aware of this subterfuge. They built a series of fortified military outposts at key mountain passes and river crossings, and they instituted a rigorous permit system known as the Cha-Yin. Every caravan leader was required to carry this official document, which detailed their cargo, their route, and their final destination. But the sheer, overwhelming scale of the terrain was the smugglers' greatest ally. How could a handful of garrison soldiers possibly patrol thousands of miles of jagged cliffs and deep, shadowy gorges? This impossible task meant that for centuries, the legitimate trade in tea and horses provided a steady, reliable cover for a parallel economy of forbidden goods, proving that the most useful road is often the one that does not appear on any official map. The rivers themselves became highways of deception. The Tigris and Euphrates, the twin lifelines of Mesopotamia, carried more than just water and official trade barges. For Babylonian merchants chafing under the king's heavy taxes, these flowing roads offered a perfect, fluid path for contraband. The official tax collection points were fixed on the banks, but a smuggler's boat was a moving target, its secrets hidden beneath the murky waterline. Their greatest innovation was the vessel itself. They designed and built specialized boats with cunningly concealed compartments built directly into the hull. These hidden voids sat below the water level, making them impossible to detect from the outside. An inspector could board a boat and see only a legitimate cargo of dates or barley, never suspecting that a fortune in untaxed silver, fine textiles, or precious oils was suspended just inches beneath his feet, sealed away from sight and sound. The operation extended far beyond the boats. Smugglers established clandestine nighttime transfer points at lonely bends in the river, far from any settlement. Under the cover of darkness, goods would be silently moved from a deep-hulled smuggling vessel to a network of smaller, faster skiffs. These smaller boats could then slip into narrow irrigation canals or hide among the dense reeds, vanishing long before the sun rose. They even co-opted the local population, forming alliances with fishermen who knew the river's every mood and current. A fisherman casting his net was the perfect lookout, using a simple lantern signal or a specific bird call to warn approaching smugglers of a royal patrol boat moving upriver. How do you police a moving, liquid border? The Babylonian authorities responded with a system of control. They established permanent inspection stations at the river's most strategic narrow points, where the channel was constricted and every boat was forced to slow down and pass within easy reach. They launched their own fleet of dedicated river patrols manned by soldiers with the authority to stop and search any vessel, day or night. This was an arms race of ingenuity. As smugglers built more sophisticated hidden compartments, officials developed longer probing rods and began using divers to physically inspect the undersides of suspicious hulls. This relentless cat-and-mouse game on the water proved that the geography of a land does not just shape its cities, but also the secret pathways that circumvent its laws. The deep forests of Germania concealed a trade more ancient than Rome itself. While Roman legions patrolled the major riverways, Celtic merchants moved a different kind of treasure, the golden, translucent amber of the Baltic coast. This fossilized resin, coveted for jewelry and amulets, created a river of wealth flowing south, and Rome was determined to dam it with taxes and customs posts. The Celts, however, possessed an asset no legionnaire could match: an intimate, generational knowledge of the land. They abandoned the well-trodden Roman roads, carving paths through dense, trackless woodlands and across treacherous, boggy moors that were impassable to heavy Roman supply carts. Their pack animals were agile and sure-footed, their guides born to the wilderness. This was not just a physical journey, it was a social one. The Celts relied on a network of allied tribes, forging relationships that allowed goods to pass from one trusted group to the next like a secret handshake. A bundle of amber might change hands a dozen times on its journey south, each transaction moving it further beyond the reach of Roman tax collectors. They used the natural world itself as their warehouse, creating hidden caches of goods buried near distinctive trees or concealed in caves, to be retrieved weeks or even months later by the next link in the chain. The Roman response was a classic blend of stick and carrot. They pushed their military frontier deeper into the forest, establishing fortified outposts at key river fords and mountain passes in an attempt to force the trade back into the open. Simultaneously, they offered lucrative trade deals and official recognition to powerful chieftains who agreed to bring their amber through authorized channels. This dual strategy sought to turn the Celts against one another, using privilege to break the very networks that had defied imperial control. It was a clear admission that sometimes the most powerful weapon is not a sword, but a deep, unspoken understanding of the paths less traveled. The desert sun beat down on a caravan of camels, their precious cargo of frankincense and myrrh filling the air with a sacred scent that was the very breath of wealth in the ancient world. For the Sabaean kingdoms of southern Arabia, this incense trade was not just business. It was a divine right, a royal monopoly so lucrative they built their entire civilization upon it. They guarded the secrets of the aromatic trees, controlled the production, and taxed every ounce that moved along the official incense trail. To challenge this control was to challenge the kingdom itself, yet the potential rewards made the risk irresistible. The smugglers who operated in this harsh landscape became masters of the unseen path. They abandoned the well-patrolled official caravan routes, striking out across the most desolate and waterless stretches of desert, following trails known only to a handful of trusted Bedouin guides. These secret paths were not marked on any map. They were passed down through generations, a living geography of smuggling that existed in memory and experience alone. But their deception did not stop at the route. Some of the boldest smugglers went straight to the source, establishing hidden groves and clandestine processing camps far from the eyes of royal inspectors. Here, they could produce their own frankincense completely outside the official economy. For those who could not manage that, another clever trick emerged. They would carefully mix the high-quality, genuine resin with cheaper, inferior look-alikes, like pine sap or other common tree gums. This allowed them to stretch a small amount of real incense into a much larger volume that could still pass a visual inspection, at least until it was burned and its weak aroma betrayed the fraud. How could a kingdom police an entire desert? The Sabaean authorities understood that in this environment, control was not about walls but about water. They established fortified outposts at the few reliable oases, effectively creating choke points where all legitimate travel was forced to stop. They employed desert scouts, men who knew the land as well as the smugglers, to patrol the emptiness and report any unauthorized movement. By controlling the water, they controlled life itself, turning the desert from a smuggler's highway into a potential death trap for those who dared to travel without permission. This high-stakes game in the heart of the desert proved that the most valuable asset in smuggling was not always the contraband itself, but the intimate, life-saving knowledge of how to move through a forbidden landscape unseen. A hollowed-out walking staff carried by a pair of traveling monks held a secret more valuable than any relic. Inside its bamboo shaft, nestled in a small bed of mulberry leaves, were the silkworm eggs that would shatter a centuries-old monopoly. For generations, the Chinese Empire had fiercely guarded the secrets of sericulture, treating the knowledge of how to raise silkworms and unwind their precious cocoons as a state secret on par with military strategy. The Byzantine Empire, desperate to break its dependence on expensive Chinese silk and stop the hemorrhage of gold, turned to industrial espionage. The operation required more than just smuggling. It required the smuggling of life itself. The monks, likely Nestorian Christians who traveled the trade routes between East and West, possessed the perfect cover for their mission. Their religious robes invited trust, and their pilgrim staves were a common, unremarkable sight. The real challenge was biological. Silkworm eggs are incredibly delicate and must be kept at a stable temperature. The journey was thousands of miles long, taking months by foot and caravan. The monks had to secretly gather fresh mulberry leaves, the only food the hatched larvae would eat, all while avoiding the ever-watchful eyes of Chinese border guards who knew the immense value of what they protected. Success meant not just reaching Byzantine territory, but arriving with viable eggs ready to hatch. Once the precious cargo was delivered, the secret workshops sprang up across the empire, particularly in cities like Constantinople and Beirut. These were not grand factories, but hidden rooms in urban basements or isolated rural buildings, where the constant rustling of countless silkworms could be masked. The humid, warm air needed for the insects to thrive was a telltale sign, as was the distinct scent of mulberry leaves. the Byzantine authorities, who now held their own official monopoly, were suddenly in the same position as the Chinese. They conducted aggressive raids on these illicit operations, confiscating looms, destroying cocoons, and imposing brutal penalties on those who dared to challenge the emperor's control over this new source of wealth. This was a pivotal moment in economic history where the most prized smuggled good was not a spice or a gem, but the living, breathing knowledge of an entire industry, proving that an idea, once set free, can never truly be caged again. A Viking longship laden with Islamic silver moved like a shadow through the misty riverways of the Baltic. This was not a raid, but a carefully planned smuggling operation, turning the very rivers that were highways of trade into secret corridors for avoiding the king's tax collectors. The silver dirhams flowing north from the Abbasid Caliphate were the lifeblood of the Viking economy, and every coin lost to a toll was a fortune wasted. Their methods were a brutal fusion of commerce and conquest. They used their unparalleled knowledge of the labyrinthine waterways to chart courses through shallow, treacherous tributaries that were impassable for the heavier, deeper-drafted patrol boats of local chieftains. Small, wooded river islands became temporary treasuries, where chests of silver could be buried beneath a specific rock or a blazed tree, to be retrieved weeks later by a different crew, fracturing the journey and leaving no continuous trail for authorities to follow. But their most audacious tactic was the coordinated raid. A band of warriors would launch a swift, noisy assault on an official toll station, drawing the entire garrison out to defend the post. While the guards were occupied, the real treasure, a fleet of low, fast ships packed with silver, would glide silently past the undefended station just a few hundred yards away. This was smuggling elevated to a military art form, where violence was not the goal but a strategic diversion. The response from Baltic rulers was a fortress-building frenzy. They strengthened existing strongholds at key river narrows and constructed new, intimidating timber forts that commanded the widest, most navigable channels. They launched their own fleets of patrol boats, manned by archers with the authority to challenge any vessel that attempted to bypass the official routes. This escalating conflict turned the serene Baltic rivers into a contested chessboard, where a smuggler's cunning and a king's authority were locked in a perpetual, silent war, proving that the most effective criminal operations are often those backed by the threat of a sword. Far from the royal plazas and towering pyramids, a different kind of journey unfolded through the dense Mesoamerican jungle. Maya merchants carried a treasure more valuable than gold in their world, the vibrant green jade sourced only from the treacherous Motagua River Valley. For the Maya elite, this stone was the essence of wind and life, a sacred material for ritual masks and royal regalia, and its trade was tightly controlled to maintain their divine authority and economic power. This royal monopoly created a powerful incentive for anyone outside the inner circle to find a way around the official control points. The smugglers who rose to this challenge became masters of their environment. They abandoned the wide, well-guarded Sakpiop, the raised stone causeways, instead forging paths through nearly impenetrable jungle, across swift rivers and over rugged highlands. Their canoes did not travel by day, but moved silently under the cover of darkness, their paddles dipping into the water without a sound to avoid alerting the king's watchmen along the banks. The jade itself was expertly hidden, tucked inside large, crudely woven bags of sea salt or buried deep within bales of raw, unprocessed cotton. To a cursory inspection at a checkpoint, the cargo appeared to be a shipment of common, low-value goods, its true worth concealed by a layer of everyday necessity. How do you find a stone that does not wish to be found? The Maya authorities were not fooled. They established rigorous checkpoints at the most unavoidable geographical bottlenecks, the narrowest parts of rivers and the only viable passes through mountain ranges. Here they stationed inspectors who were not just soldiers but true experts in deception. These men knew the weight and feel of a legitimate cotton bale, and they were trained to probe shipments with long, sharp sticks, listening for the telltale clink of stone against stone hidden within the soft fibers. This final operation brings our journey full circle, revealing a truth that echoes from the Silk Road to the jungle path. The methods of smuggling and the strategies of enforcement are never just about economics. They are a direct reflection of what a society holds most sacred. The drive to possess jade and the equal determination to control it were both rooted in the same deep cultural belief, proving that the most enduring conflicts are fought not just over wealth, but over the very symbols of power and spirit. These 15 shadowy operations reveal a timeless truth about human nature, that immense ingenuity often flourishes in the spaces between the law and a potential fortune. From hollowed-out walking staffs carrying silkworm eggs to amphorae with false bottoms, ancient peoples perfected a stunning array of deceptions to circumvent royal monopolies and heavy taxes. They did not merely break rules, they engineered entire systems of evasion, creating hidden compartments in ships, forging secret paths through deserts and jungles, and weaving complex networks of trusted allies that stretched across continents. This was not a story of simple crime, but a sophisticated historical dialogue, a relentless back and forth between rule breakers and rule enforcers. Each new smuggling method, whether it was priests falsifying temple inventories or Viking crews staging diversionary raids, forced authorities to innovate in response. They developed specialized tools like probing rods and scent hounds, built fortified outposts at geographical choke points, and established early forms of intelligence networks with paid informants. This escalating battle of wits fundamentally shaped the development of law enforcement, taxation, and international trade regulation, laying the groundwork for the customs agencies and border controls we know today. Understanding these ancient practices helps us appreciate a powerful constant throughout history, that overwhelming economic incentives will always inspire breathtaking human creativity for both admirable and illicit ends. The drive to possess silk, spices, or silver pushed people to become masters of logistics, geography, and psychology, their legacy etched into the very principles of modern commerce. We would love to hear which of these ancient smuggling methods you found the most clever or surprising. Was it the biological espionage of the silk monks, or the sheer audacity of the Roman grain diversions? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey into the hidden economies of the past, be sure to subscribe for more explorations of the historical mysteries that continue to quietly shape our world today.